There's a popular song that goes as, "What is love? Baby, don't hurt me." That is what love is supposed to be. Beautiful without deliberate hurt. But what happens when this is not the case? We try to find love in different ways, and in these modern times, on different platforms and avenues. Tinder being one of them. So, what would result in a date put together on Tinder between one Grace Millane and another gentleman, ending up in her disappearance and subsequent murder? This is the story of the Tinder murder. If you are ready, take a seat, buckle up, and let's go for the ride. Grace Millane was born on the 2nd of December 1996. She was a British tourist whose disappearance in Auckland, New Zealand, which occurred in December 2018, would spark global concern and outrage. Eventually, a 26-year-old man by name Jesse Shane Kempson was charged for her murder on 8th of December 2018, and a search would eventually find her body in the Waitaka Ranges to the west of Auckland the following day. Initially, Kempson's name was suppressed by New Zealand courts, meaning that it could not be published in New Zealand. This did not stand over time because some international media outlets still chose to publish it, contrary to the New Zealand court's order. Kempson was tried at the Auckland High Court in November 2019, at which he claimed that Grace died during consensual sex. After a 3-week trial, he was convicted by a unanimous guilty verdict and later sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. Kempson would file an appeal against his conviction, which was still dismissed by New Zealand's Court of Appeal on 18th of December 2020. Eventually, the suppression order was lifted by the New Zealand Supreme Court on 22nd of December 2020. It was also revealed that Kempson had been convicted on multiple rape and abuse charges relating to 2 other women in October and November 2020. Now, this is the overview. Let's get into the details. Who was Grace Millane? Grace Millane was originally from Wickford, Essex, in Britain. She had recently graduated from the University of Lincoln with a bachelor's degree in advertising and marketing, and was on a backpacking tour during her gap year. So Grace had decided to travel the world to see what was out there. Grace was on a 2-week stay in New Zealand after already spending 6 weeks in South America. She entered New Zealand on the 20th of November 2018 and traveled around the Upper North Island. Grace would eventually arrive in Auckland on the 30th of November the same year. Around 9 p.m. on December 1st, Grace was seen in Victoria Street in Auckland's Central Business District, and just 15 minutes later, she was captured on CCTV at Sky City. She was later seen around 9:41 p.m. exactly at the City Life Hotel on Queen Street with a gentleman who would later be identified as Jesse Kempson. After this, Grace would then go missing, and investigations would begin, especially given the fact that her disappearance would also come with a complete cutoff with the link between her and her family as far as reaching out to them is concerned. Her family would initiate a report to the police based on the premise that it is utterly unusual of Grace to go for a period without reaching out to them. Investigations would reveal the following. Milane's parents had become concerned after she did not reply to birthday wishes they sent her on 2nd of December 2018. This was to be her 22nd birthday, and it was abnormal that Grace, as per her usual self, would leave birthday messages unanswered and also not return any phone calls. Police investigations would later resolve that she is actually missing, as had been reported by her parents, and 3 days later this would be established as a fact. The hotel she was staying at reported that she did not go back to her room on the night of her disappearance, and police initially said that there was no evidence of foul play, but shockingly, they would later gather evidence that she was no longer alive. Police announced on 8th of December 2018 that they were treating Grace's case as a homicide investigation, and an investigation which would go on to reveal Kempson as a suspect, and he would subsequently get charged with her murder. Further investigations by police would later find Grace's body on the 9th of December around 4 p.m. off the Scenic Drive in the Waitaki Ranges, around 19 kilometers west of central Auckland. A post-mortem examination was done on December 10th, and further investigations of the area where Grace was found were carried out on December 11th. Police asked for the public's help in finding a shovel they believed was related to the inquiry. Eventually, a shovel fitting the police description was found on the 13th of December the same year. Police also requested public help tracing the movements of a rental car Kempson leased between 2nd and the 3rd of December. It would turn out later that the car had subsequently been released and was located on 8th of December in Taupo, 275 kilometers south of Auckland. Police would eventually put all this together, and eventually after that, Kempson, 26 years old, was taken into custody on 8th of December at 3 p.m. He had been staying at the City Life Hotel in central Auckland. Kempson appeared in the Auckland District Court on the 10th of December 2018, charged with murdering Grace. Who then is Kempson? Background checks will reveal the following. Kempson was born and grew up in the Wellington region. After his parents separated when he was 9, Kempson was raised by his father and grandfather. His mother moved overseas while his father remarried and had a blended family. Kempson played softball at a regional representative level for multiple teams. He also worked as a bartender and builder or labourer, and also lived in Sydney, Australia between 2013 and 2016. Kempson was estranged from his family. He also had a drunk driving conviction in New Zealand and had been arrested for disorderly behavior in Auckland and Sydney. Kempson's paternal grandfather also alleged he had fathered a child while living in Sydney, but this was disputed by other relatives. The case would then go to trial after it had generated unprecedented reactions from the New Zealand public, with the Prime Minister issuing a public apology to the family of Grace on the 10th of December, saying, quote, "On behalf of New Zealand, I want to apologize. Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't." During this press conference, you would see the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, coming close to shedding tears. It was a global outcry, and it would go on to initiate a trial on the 4th of November 2019. During this trial, a jury was also constituted, and the trial was expected to last 5 weeks. Kempson reaffirmed his earlier not guilty plea, and proceedings started. The prosecution was led by Crown Solicitor Brian Dickey, and who argued that Kempson had strangled Grace to death following a Tinder date. Apparently, Kempson and Grace had met on Tinder, hooked up, and they had then gone on a date. But unfortunately, the date would end up in the murder of Grace by none other than Kempson. The Crown also testified that after killing her, Kempson conducted several internet searches on how to dispose of bodies, as well as viewing pornography. It would also go on to say that Kempson calmly and callously managed to dispose of Grace's body and other evidence, and then created a labyrinth of storytelling and lies to cover his tracks. Eventually, 3 female witnesses, whom Kempson had also met through Tinder, testified that he liked bondage sex, including choking. The Crown also presented security camera footage of Kempson and Grace, including renting a carpet cleaning machine at the Countdown supermarket. Further witnesses, one being a pathologist, will testify that a post-mortem examination of Grace's body had found bruising consistent with someone who had been restrained and asphyxiated, and Grace's post-mortem blood alcohol concentration was measured at 106 milligrams of alcohol per 100 milliliters of blood. That was over the legal driving limit of 50 milligrams per 100 milliliters of blood. This is a bit technical, but all in all, there was a lot of alcohol in her system. However, Kempson's defense team, led by Ian Brookie, would argue that Grace's death was as a result of consensual sexual misadventure between Kempson and Grace. They would allege that Grace had an interest in bondage sex and had asked Kempson to choke her during a consensual sex game, which went wrong. While they acknowledged that Kempson had tried to hide and bury Grace's body, they contended that he had panicked. The defense expert witness, another pathologist, contested the initial autopsy evidence, claiming that her injuries were consistent with a consensual sex act due to the lack of defensive wounds on Grace's body. They also alleged that Grace's alcohol consumption could have contributed to her death. The defense also argued that Kempson's claiming to be wealthy and successful stemmed from his personal insecurity. So this trial was presenting two angles, one being pushed by the prosecution and another being peddled by the defense of Kempson. The trial would go on to last for 3 solid weeks. Eventually, the jury, which consisted of 7 women and 5 men, returned a verdict of guilty on 22nd of November 2019 after deliberating for 5 good hours. The verdict was welcomed by Grace's parents and family. Several members of the jury reportedly wept following the verdict. In New Zealand, murder carries a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 10 years, except when such a sentence would be manifestly unjust. A typical example is a killing like mercy killings, and in such cases, judges would have a discretion to order a longer non-parole period. Fast forward, on the 21st of February 2020, Kempson was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. On the 18th of March, it was reported that Kempson would appeal his conviction and sentence at the Court of Appeal. This appeal hearing began in Auckland on the 6th of August. On the 18th of December 2020, the same Court of Appeal dismissed the appeal, although the Supreme Court ordered that the initial name suppression placed should remain in place until a further court order. However, that same day, it was reported that taxpayers had paid more than 400,000 New Zealand dollars in Kempson's legal aid. And on 29th June 2021, the Supreme Court dismissed Kempson's application for leave to appeal the verdict, thereby exhausting his legal avenues to overturn his conviction. Grace has since been buried, and her family is trying to find ways of moving on. Sadly, Grace's father has also passed on, and what is left of her family are trying to move on, forever mourning the death of their beloved daughter. For those of you out there who resort to finding love on various platforms, don't forget that roses have thorns, and sometimes a killer can have a beautiful or handsome face and a charming smile. Be careful out there and stay safe. Goodbye.